Welcome to episode 83. I'm your host, Natalie Hall. The Place of Sound is a show that explores the theme of space, or the social geography, using sound and listening. This is done through a variety of audio media production formats, so you can expect to do a few different types of listening in a single show. Episodes consist of what we refer to as audio portraits, or oral history-style interviews that explore topics of home. Soundscape compositions, which use everyday sounds to communicate the personal and social significance of a given place. And we typically end the episode with a short documentary-style piece that explores the place-based identity of the producer. The aim with these projects is to allow the producer to think about the places that made them who they are today. These are the types of projects you can expect to hear on The Place of Sound, and all of them are produced by students here at Carleton University. They're what gets produced in Comms 4501, Digital Media Production, which is Vincent Androsani's fourth-year workshop course in the Communication and Media Studies program. Hi everyone, welcome back to The Place of Sound. This week we have more student work to bring to you, and I'm really excited for us to listen to them. This doesn't always happen, and we don't plan it this way, but I think there is a really clear through line in these projects. Ideas of finding home in a new place, specifically when you move for school and to be a student. So when you're listening to these projects, just keep that in mind. Maybe reflect on your own experience of moving cities, moving from your hometown, and the challenges that come with it, and also ways you connected with this new space. So each student will jump in to offer a quick introduction to their piece before we listen to it, to give a sense of whose voice you'll be hearing and what the conversation will be about. To start us off, we have Grace McClintock-Luft in discussion with her friend Adriana on how one finds home in a brand new place. For Adriana, the answer to that is water. Here is In Two Places.
For many people, home is a singularity. It's a place you walk the streets of your entire life, or people you always have and always will be able to turn to when the going gets rough. But what happens when you have to move? How do you reconcile the familiarity of where you grew up with the homes that you create elsewhere? In this audio portrait, my friend Adriana speaks about finding connections to her childhood home in various lakes and rivers around the world. In the process, she reveals that no matter how many new homes you create, some things are universal.
So I didn't realize how fortunate I was to be living by a lake my entire life until I was no longer living by a lake my entire life. And that first realization came when I was living in Germany, and there's no lakes there. We had this little pathetic river. I love the dry sand, but it was kind of a pathetic little river running through town, and that was it. And then one day we were on a camping trip, and we went to Schlocksee, which is a little lake not too far from campus. And I don't know if I was feeling homesick or anything, but I just submerged myself in that body of water, and suddenly I felt like I was at home. And I realized that if I was underwater, I could be in my lake at home, because it feels the exact same, just being underwater. And at that point I realized, oh, this is almost relieving. It's really comforting, and it kind of became a way to relieve stress for me, actually. So when I was a camp counselor in New Brunswick, even though New Brunswick is also a place I kind of consider home despite not having lived there very long, I found myself still submerging myself in the river. And it was like, oh, you're underwater, like nothing else, like there's no, like the world is just quiet, and it's just like, oh, I could be 12 in my lake at home. I get to be in two places at once in a way, which is kind of nice. The first year of university, I laughed a lot because I met somebody and they were like, I moved to Ottawa because it's so close to water. And I was like, what? Because I grew up in a city that was literally called the City of Lakes. And I was like, you're joking. But they're like, it has the river and it has the canal and it has the other river. And that's a lot of water for some people. And I was like, whoa, I didn't realize that. It didn't feel like a lot of water at all for me. And then first year, I felt like a little water deprived, which is actually why I started rowing. Being on the water every day made me really feel connected to the physical place in a sense. I felt really in tune with Ottawa.
Thank you so much to Grace and Adriana. I also feel very connected to water, less so from my hometown, which is Mississauga, although we do have great access to Lake Ontario. But my mother comes from an island in Portugal, and I visited my family a lot there. I actually made an episode while I was on the island last summer, so if you want to check that out, you can find it at theplaceofsound.com or wherever you find your podcasts. And here's a little clip from that.
It just so happened he dove about 40 feet, and it was the mother lode. He came across a cave that was teeming with these things, and he put 2 on his chest and 2 on top of that, just right on his chest, just right up on his chest, and then 2 more. So he was trying to carry 4 of them together. And he then, at one point, after a few minutes, his buoy disappears and we can't see it. And my dad starts freaking out. And I put my mask on my face and I dive. What had happened was he had dove into a cave that had a rocky pillar just outside of it, and came out the other side of this rocky pillar, so the rope got stuck underneath. He didn't have the breath to dive down again to dislodge it, so he kept pushing up his flippers, which brought the buoy under the surface of the water. So when I approached my brother in about 15-20 feet of water, he was gray and unconscious right next to the buoy, and he was lifeless there. And I dove past him, and it was almost beyond my lung capacity. But I got down there, and I'm pulling with all my force to get that rope dislodged from the rock. And finally it came up, and the buoy jumped out of the water. My brother slowly floated up. Eu fui à terra do Bravo. My dad screamed like he was looking at his dead son. I never wanted to hear those sounds emitted from him again, and which we never did. What had saved his life was that he didn't inhale water. Most people that are just about to drown will take a last breath, and that breath of salt water in your lungs will kill you. And he didn't do that. He just passed out due to lack of oxygen. But his jaw was clamped on his snorkel. My dad's trying to rip the snorkel out of his clenched jaw, which he did. And then I gave him very rudimentary mouth-to-mouth, at which point he sputtered up and he came to, and thankfully he had saved his life. When he describes it, he came to peace with his own death, actually, is what he says. And he was just watching the light rays come down upon him, and he found peace, actually, he said, during that process. And he had tried to cut the rope with the serrated edge shell of the kavak. And last thing he did was squeeze his hands to the point that he had cut his hands on the shell of the fish. We came back to the port. I had to go behind a boathouse and cry my eyes out. I didn't want my dad to see that, which, he would have totally understood. And by the time we got back to Pontes Negras, a half hour later, word had got back to them. We got out of the car. They wanted to call me hero. I didn't want to hear it. And I still don't. It was a very traumatic experience. But we wanted to go back to the ocean that next day because it was literally one of those gold mine fishing holes. And my dad, who's a man of the ocean and a whaler, we had 2 more weeks of vacation, and he never stepped anywhere close to the ocean in that time that we were there. And my brother and I never spoke about it for 30 years, up until not too long ago. Actually, my dad initiated. We were at my dad's place, and we started talking about fishing here. He turned to my brother and said, "You remember what happened at Manhinha?" And he looked at me and he goes, "Yeah, he saved my life." And it was the first time we'd ever spoken of it. He ever acknowledged it in any way, and it kind of was closure for all of us. And his own kids had never heard this story up until shortly after that, and we're talking 8 to 10 years ago maximum. So yeah, it was something that he obviously had internalized and had looked at him quite dramatically as well. And because that night he had nightmares that he woke up screaming and woke me up as well, and I was always fearful for him at the time. But yeah, that was a memory that neither one of us will ever forget.
Bravo meu bem, para ver se embravecia. Cada vez fiquei mais manso, cada vez fiquei mais manso. Bravo meu bem, para a tua companhia. Bravo meu bem, para a tua companhia.
I look at my nephew and my nieces and my great nephews and nieces, and I think, they might not be around. Had I not been lucky enough to put my mask on and find him there, I would have lost my brother at 18 years of age. And my mom had a stillborn baby in 1960, who's actually buried in Sant Antonio Cemetery, right where you guys are staying. And I would have been an only at the age of 15. So I do think about it, not super often, but it comes to my mind all the time. And it's still a topic that he and I don't openly speak about, but I think that day might still come at some point. The ocean is humbling. The ocean rules. You listen to it, you abide by it, and it's an honor just to be in it at any time. But you never mistake the power and how unforgiving it is. Nature doesn't care whether you live or die necessarily, and there's plenty of things in there that will take you out if you're not careful. And that's part of the reason I love spearfishing and snorkeling in general. I'm in a place of awareness and safety, and that headspace takes every other thought out of my head, any other concerns, anything about the world, about family. So it's my little aquatic therapy, if you will. Every time I go into the ocean, I have a profound humility and respect for it.
Anyways, sorry for that shameless plug, but I wanted to show that the idea of water as a really grounding piece of the environment is something we've discussed on the show. It's something a lot of sound artists and sound producers talk about. And I thought that piece fit really well into that theme. Up next, we have Afshan Shaikh. And in this soundscape composition, she explores what it means to work a part-time job you've tried to escape from. I'm sure it's something many of us can relate to. She explores the sounds of the work environment that play in your head when you fall asleep at night. So here is Twice Too Many.
Hi, I'm Afshan, and the soundscape composition you're about to hear revolves around the dread with which I lived this past summer because I found myself working at Tim Hortons despite having quit last year. It captures my fears of being compelled to leave the place which has felt most like home. I fear the noise of customer service jobs. I fear losing the one who makes it stop. That is the sound of the Canadian classic, The Double Double, being made. During the summer of 2023, when I quit my job at the famous Brazilian company, Tim Hortons, I was certain that I would never have to make the beverage again. Yet, despite my best efforts, I couldn't even land a retail job the following summer, much less a job related to my major. This meant that I spent last summer back at Tim Hortons robotically assembling food and beverages. While working there, I had to meet superhuman production targets. I was stripped of my humanity in meeting these productivity goals, being unable to think of how I felt about customer interactions, instead dedicating what little focus I had to lamenting the fog that wrought my brain. After a few hours of working, I would finally get to take 15 minutes of an unpaid break, during which much of my paltry earnings would go back to the corporation, which would fuel me with inordinate amounts of caffeine and sugar. I knew it harmed me, but machines like myself could not run without gas. After my shift came to an end, I would drag myself back home, admiring the weeds along the way. As an Indian international student and aspiring citizen, I identify with them. Although many don't want me here, I nevertheless wish to root myself in Canadian soil. I'd rather thrive as a weed than wither as a bonsai. Waves and construction dominate Oman's sonic scene. When I lived there, conformity to religious norms stunted my growth like a bonsai preserved in weight of its eternal possessor. My branches pruned and trained, my world forbade me from dressing as I wished and feeling more than scripture allowed. That changed on October 7th, 2021. The day I landed in Ottawa, the day I took a walk all alone for the first time in my life at the age of 19. I snapped the branches, which were never mine, and shattered the only pot I thought I'd ever know. I would exercise gratitude for my newfound ability to walk alone, even when the walk home was excruciating. And when it all became too much to bear, I would turn off my engine and somehow fall asleep.
"20 minutes and you can't even make my coffee right? 3 cream, 2 milk, 1 sugar. 3 cream, 2 milk, 1 sugar. 3 cream, 2 milk, 1 sugar."
My alarm would wake me for another day of Thames, the sounds of which would haunt my slumber and waking hours alike. I would hear them incessantly, except for when.
Shaikh, annyeong. How are you, my love?
Thank you so much, Afsha. I really relate to that piece. I remember working a grocery store job in high school, and I would fall asleep at night and hear the beeping of the scanner as I fell asleep, and I would dream of scanning people's groceries at night. It can be a really dehumanizing and demoralizing experience to work a really corporate part-time job or full-time job, but it can bring us some solace, and we can feel community from the fact that many of us are doing it. Lastly, our audio documentary of the week comes from Ava Campanelli, and she explores the downtown Ottawa hostel that used to be a jail. She learns about the draw of her hometown, Ottawa, through the eyes of a tourist. So here is Cells to Suites.
Hello, my name is Ava, and I'm a fourth-year communication and media studies student at Carleton. For this audio documentary, I was tasked with exploring a place in Ottawa and uncovering the stories that emerge from it. I immediately thought of this unique hostel in downtown Ottawa and wanted to delve into its history and significance today. To do this, I visited the location, had the opportunity to explore it, and sat down for a conversation with one of the workers. I had a lot of fun putting this project together, and I hope you enjoy listening to it. As someone who grew up in Ottawa my whole life, I like to think that I've become accustomed to everything that the city has to offer. But there are times when it can surprise me. Since I am as local can get, it's hard for me to think about the things that would draw people in to come visit here. I want to know who these people are, And why are they coming to visit Ottawa? Are you from Ottawa?
No, I'm not from Ottawa. I'm from Halifax originally, and I've lived here about 2 years. I started working here in March of 2023. After doing some traveling, I was just really attracted to the hostel environment and connecting travelers to each other from across the globe.
This is Emma, the experience curator at a hostel in the heart of downtown Ottawa. Every day, she sees travelers from all over the world. I wanted to know what was bringing them to the city.
So a lot of people come here on a backpacking trip throughout Canada, and of course the capital is an important destination, especially if you're a cultural traveler and you want to see important parts of Canadian culture. We get a lot of people from around the world. Recently we had 17 Czech men stay for hockey. Yeah, lots of different countries.
It was getting clear to me that this particular hostel is a hot spot for travelers. But there's something different about this place compared to your average comfort inn.
Yeah, so before working here, I had no idea about this place as a Ottawa landmark. I really didn't even know where it was. And so I did have to familiarize myself with the history of the building. When this prison closed down, the prison conditions were like pretty decrepit. It was pretty awful. We had an ex-con who had stayed here in the 60s visit, and he described his experience as like not getting to have showers. He spent 2 weeks in solitary confinement and had to eat something called bean loaf, which is like beans plus whatever kitchen scraps were available. And also because it was in the downtown core at the time, it wasn't really an amazing place to have a prison. So I believe all the prisoners were moved to Kingston or Cornwall. And then this was chosen to become a hostel. It was debated whether or not this would become an archive or a museum, but ultimately the decision to turn this into the hostel saved the city of Ottawa millions of dollars instead of building a new hostel, and millions of dollars over time, I guess. Well, who can say? We've put like a lot of money into restoring it as well, so.
It's only in the past year that the St. Lo Jail Hostel started giving historical tours to the public. Emma is one of the people who gives these tours. Herself and another hostel worker were nice enough to give me a tour of the location, including its historic elements, which people do not sleep in. This includes the gallows and death row.
I would say that this was pretty terrible. Corporal punishment was used a lot, and like criminal punishment in Canada has evolved a lot. And of course, we were hosting executions here until the 40s.
Walking through the gallows and death row at night definitely gives an eerie feeling. While just on the floor below, guests can sleep in cells that once held inmates. Not your typical type of accommodation, but honestly, not bad at all. Emma let me go inside one of the rooms, and they are very nicely maintained and organized. However, I did have to wonder, how much of the hostel's history is used as a selling point?
Being a unique building is a great marketing tool that works for itself. And we also offer pretty comfortable accommodations for a hostel, and we have a lot of private room options that a lot of hostels don't necessarily offer. So combined with our unique setting and comfortable facilities, those are big draws, and those are often noted in our reviews. Customers love that they've stayed in a jail, but it's not necessarily the main reason that they stay here.
While the St. Lo Jail Hostel carries a fascinating and also dark history, today it stands as a vibrant testament to transformation. The staff's focus on its present-day role as a hostel and all that it has to offer for those traveling to Ottawa really speaks to how spaces can evolve over time. Where this place was once used for confinement now stands as a place connecting people across the globe and giving them the chance to explore my hometown.
We host lots of activities in the hostel to bring people together as well. Pub crawls, social walks, that kind of thing. We love to host families and students as well. So come check us out.
Thank you so much, Ava. That hostel is one I've passed a lot and heard a lot about. I love this reframing. I think it was a really interesting way to learn about your hometown and just a good experiment in shifting perspective. Once again, thank you to Grace, Afshan, and Ava for your work. And before I sign off, a couple of quick notes. A reminder that what we've listened to here on this show is only a fraction of the work produced in association with this project. If you're interested in checking out more, have a look at theplaceofsound.ca, where you're not only able to hear this audio work, but also see some of the original photos and writing that students produced to go along with the audio. There's also a featured work section on the site's blog, where you can access some notable individual projects. And in the classes section, you can have a look at the portfolio website designed by students themselves, which host every project produced in this course. And lastly, under the Listen link, you're able to access the show's archive and listen back to any episode of the show you'd like to hear. But in the meantime, keep your ear out for upcoming episodes of the show, which air on CKCU Radio every other Monday at 6:30 p.m. and are available wherever you get your podcasts. We'll see you next time. Thank you for tuning into The Place of Sound, and happy listening.